On August 26th, 2017, in the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, Conor McGregor is going to be fighting Floyd Mayweather, not for a title, but undoubtedly this is going to be the biggest fight in combat sports history, period. I'm going to label this the $1 billion dance. A little bit taken from another video I saw saying the $180 million dance for Conor McGregor. But I say $1 billion dance because I predict this fight is going to exceed $1 billion US in revenue. Now, this is a crazy fight. Everybody agrees. Now, but the opinion is divided. On one end, do you think there's people who think that this is just ridiculous? This is a shit show. This is a circus. This is like a freak show. You say, look, Conor McGregor has no experience. He has no professional fights. And he's going to be getting in there with probably the greatest boxer of this generation. Someone with a 49-0 boxing record who's been doing this since he was a little kid. Conor's got no chance, right? So that's one end. The other end, people say, well, good on Conor. He's doing it for the payday. He's kind of duped everybody into doing this. He's going to make more money in this fight than he will do throughout his whole rest of his career. Good for him. But, he knows deep down he's not got a chance. He's just going in there for the payday. That's it. But then you've got other people who go, well, no. Conor McGregor is a freak athlete. Somebody who's achieved more than anybody else in the sport. Known for these record-breaking predictions and record-breaking pay-per-view events within mixed martial arts. And, look at his power. He's going to go in there and he's going to knock Floyd Mayweather out. Has a different fighting style, a different range. He's going to be unorthodox in there. Something Floyd's never seen before. Right? Well, all of these are opinions, and this is what's making this fight the biggest fight in history, because there's so much unknown. It's the two worlds colliding, the mixed martial arts and boxing. These two combat sports have had a lot of rivalry over the years since the UFC has become more popular. You've had crossover fights in the past where James Toney fought Randy Couture under MMA rules and was quickly submitted. But Conor McGregor's going over into boxing. The first high-level mixed martial artist to ever do this. I can't think of anyone else who's stepped in there into the boxing ring. So, a couple of stats and predictions that I think people should know about. Conor McGregor set the Madison Square Garden gate record in his last fight against Eddie Alvarez. I'm predicting that this Floyd Mayweather Conor McGregor fight in the T-Mobile Arena is going to set their gate record. And that is not going to be broken for quite some time, if ever. Also, Floyd Mayweather is going to break his pay-per-view record when he fought Manny Pacquiao. I think he's going to break through that. I think it was 4 million pay-per-view buys, or maybe 5 million pay-per-view buys. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he's going to break that. So Floyd's going to break that. Conor McGregor is going to set the highest paid debut, which will never be broken unless somebody else does a similar career move where they're big in one sport and then they cross over and have another boxing fight. And I just want to break down these three areas. You've got the before the fight, and after fight. Now, as this has been recorded, we're currently in the pre-fight area. We've just had the World Press Conference tour that took place in LA, Toronto, Brooklyn, and London. Massive all over social media, trending every single day. Great entertainment, viral video clips, and viral social media posts every day. You've got Conor's suit, you've got the trash talking backwards and forwards, you've got Conor's interaction with Floyd Sr. after the first press event. You've got the whole crazy fur coat that Conor wore in Brooklyn. So, and you've got the whole Floyd Mayweather throwing the money, the iconic shots there, the backward and forth in Toronto with the bag and the Irish flag. Just great entertainment all round, and that has obviously helped the pay-per-view interest in this fight. Everybody's hyped for it now, like really excited. Can't wait to see the fight happen. But let's go back about maybe a year ago when rumblings of this fight started to appear. At first, everyone said it's never going to happen. It's all talk. It's just both fighters are just trying to boost their own social media presence. It's just to self-promotion purposes. The fight's never going to happen, and even if it did, it'd be completely ridiculous. There's too many moving parts, the UFC won't allow it. Floyd and his team, they're notoriously difficult. It took them 4 years to make the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight. It's too many moving parts, too many people involved. Conor's not got his license. He's not going to get his license. There's too many impediments that are going to stop this fight from ever taking place. Dana White's completely against it. He can't see it happening. It's not going to let it. And if the UFC don't sign off, then McGregor won't be allowed to fight because he's under an ironclad contract with the UFC. It's not going to happen. Just forget about it. Move on with your life. But, as we all know, it did happen. Conor made it happen. He managed to talk everybody in. He managed to talk the UFC, Brass, Dana White, and Ari Emanuel, and the owners of the UFC into going along with this fight. He managed to talk himself into being a co-promoter. He pointed out the Mayweather Sports and Entertainment logo on the presser banners and on the posters. He's managed to come to an agreement or asked the UFC to go and negotiate on his behalf with Al Heyman and the Mayweather, the money team. That is incredible. So even the fact that we're here is highly improbable. But now the goalpost shifted. Everyone said, oh, it's never going to happen, but it did happen. And now he said, well, he's never going to win. And when he's going to go in there, he's going to look stupid. Mayweather's going to box his face off, going to knock him out in 2 rounds. He's not going to land a punch. And these are all professional pundits, experts, boxing trainers who are coming out and saying these things. And the hype, the putting so much pressure onto Floyd Mayweather, the making it him seem like he's a god, like he's incapable of being hit, that he's so much better skill wise that it's just going to be like a man fighting a child. that it's going to be just so easy. Now, because that's the expectation, I personally don't think that the reality is going to live up to that expectation. I think it's going to be a much closer fight than anybody actually anticipates. I think Conor's going to land some really hard shots. I think he's going to come out as the people's champion, and people are going to be talking about how great McGregor did, even if he loses a decision. Now, obviously, if he gets knocked out, then that's a different story. But I think that people, no matter what, will look back on what Conor did as being a very brave thing, going in there against all odds when everybody doubted him into a completely different sport on the biggest stage imaginable and gave it a good go regardless and went in there to fight. Now, will Mayweather come out and fight? Because he didn't come out and fight against Manny Pacquiao. So, because all the pundits and everyone is placing such an enormous amount of pressure on Floyd, if he just goes in and does his normal defensive dancing around the ring, people are just going to look, well, what are you doing? You're fighting someone you should beat easily. You should go out there and actually try and put on a show. And he said that he's going to go in and try and knock him out. But if he doesn't do that, then Floyd's just going to be absolutely ridiculed all over the press, all over the media, and Conor's going to come out with even more fame and status and kudos. Let's talk a little bit about when they announced the fight, because it was announced before this deal was done that the Canelo Triple G fight was going to take place in September, I think September the 16th or 17th, at the T-Mobile Arena, and they'd taken that date. And that was rumoured the date that Floyd and Conor was trying to set up for. But they got the deal done, and they announced the deal a week before the Andre Ward Sergey Kovalev fight, which was absolutely a genius move. Completely took all the shine and hype off of that fight. Nobody was talking about that fight. Everyone was talking about Floyd and Conor and how great or how ridiculous all the attention was on them. So that was a brilliant move. But it was also announced that the date that had been chosen was August the 26th. So a couple weeks prior to the Canelo Triple G fight, which that just, it gets in there before, gets the fans to pay for this, which diminishes the amount of buys for that. It's tactically genius. And anybody who doesn't recognise that or doesn't see that is a moron, in my opinion. Now, let's turn to social media, because when I was starting to make these notes for this presentation, Conor, this was before the before the World Tour, Conor had 14.3 million followers on Instagram. And he'd been growing like crazy up to that point. I mean, one of the fastest growing sports stars on Instagram. But Floyd, at this time, had about 15.7 or 15.8 million Instagram followers. So more. And at the time, even though I didn't go on record and say it, which was my mistake, I should have, I predicted that by the time these two fight, Conor will have surpassed Floyd Mayweather in terms of his Instagram followers. Now, after we could skip ahead a few weeks and the press conferences is out of the way, Conor now has 15.8 million followers, so the same number that Floyd had, and Floyd has 16.2 million. So he's closing that gap really fast, and we've still got another 5 or so weeks to the fight. Now, going into the fight, I just want to say how Conor uses social media and Instagram is genius. He's so much better at it than Floyd. I mean, Floyd, you look at his Instagram grid, right? He's posted nothing since the press conferences. Not one single Instagram photo has he posted since those press conferences. His last kind of training photo was his yoga video, his yoga photo, where he's in that purple room doing yoga. And that only got like 177,000 hearts on it. The last photo he posted was of his tax document. That was it. Now, you contrast that with what Conor's doing. I'm just going to quickly go on over. He is posting photos and videos every single day. Like, maybe on average, he's averaging maybe 2 a day, but some days he does 5 or 6. Some days he does 1 or 2. But let's say he's averaging 2 to 3 every single day. And he's getting over 500,000 hearts on every single one of his posts. You know, he's mixing it up. He's doing training videos. He's doing pictures with his little son. He's doing sparring photos of him training on his bicycles and in his high-tech equipment in that underwater treadmill. Like, it's just so much more varied. It's so much more interesting. It's engaging people in the fight and drawing people in, and is gonna surpass Floyd maybe within the next week or two. Certainly before the fight, and after he's gonna blow past probably 20 million Instagram followers, which shows you his star power. And probably the reason why the UFC went for this, because they knew that it was going to bring a lot of attention to Conor and to the UFC. And if by some miracle Conor pulls off the upset, which would be the biggest upset in sporting history, far bigger than Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson, when Buster Douglas beat Tyson. But, I mean, how big would Conor's star power be? And that would translate back into MMA if he goes and fights maybe Nate Diaz for the trilogy fight, or if he fights Ferguson or Nurmagomedov. You know, it's going to bring so many more eyeballs and attention, and that's going to translate into UFC pay-per-view buys. Now, let's talk about who's the A side and B side. Before the fight, before it was made, everyone was saying, "Oh, Floyd is by far the A side. He's going to be making the lion's share of the purse. Maybe Conor's only going to get 10, 15, 25 million." Right? Now, an interesting thing that occurred to me, but not many people talked about it, was when Dana White and Leonard Ellerbe, Floyd's the Money Team CEO, when they gave their initial press conference announcing that the fight had been made, everyone was talking about the money, the split, the purse split, and they said, "Well, we've signed confidentiality agreements." Now, to me, that I thought, well, why did they sign confidentiality agreements when Floyd loves to brag? Floyd would love to brag about how much he's making. Now, there's two possibilities in my mind. Either one, Conor took a ridiculously little settlement, or agreed to fight on a very small share of the purse, and so he wanted the confidentiality agreement so that he wouldn't lose face, to the media. But I don't think that. I think Conor brings so much in terms of promotion, and I think as businessmen, they'll have respected his social media engagement and his previous accomplishments and the amount of eyeballs he's going to bring. And to get the deal done, I think they'll have offered him a very generous split, maybe a 40-60 or maybe even a 50-50, who knows? But this leads to the second option. They signed the confidentiality agreement for Floyd to save face, because he's always been bragging about how much he's the A-side and how much more money he makes over everybody else's fighters, and he didn't want it discussed that he'd given a 50-50 split to somebody who has got a 0-for-0 record. So you just think about that. Let me know what you think. Right, let's go and analyse Conor a little bit. Everybody knows about Conor's left hand. He knocks people out all the time. He knocked Jose Aldo out in 13 seconds with one shot from his left hand. He was ripping Eddie Alvarez apart with that left hand. He was dropping Nate Diaz multiple times in his rematch. Even in the first fight with Nate, he was smacking him really hard. You know, he's beat many a men with that power left hand. Now, if you'd all gone back into ancient history to the Greeks, you know, they were massive believers in like these demigods, like half human, half man, where the gods had gone down and slept with mortal women and had these semi-godlike offspring. You know, and you had like these characters like Achilles and Hercules. Hercules, famous for his strength and his athletic abilities. Achilles, it was like foretold that he wouldn't be injured in battle because he was that strong and that technical. Well, if we was to go back, people, and it was, say, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and Conor had lived then, people would have been talking about that gift that he has in his left hand, that punching ability. Now, there's lots of the things that goes into power, and it is still a debated topic, but undoubtedly, like the size of the wrist, the size of the hands, the side of the shoulders, just the frame, but also the connective tissue in the muscles, and also the technique that you throw in, it all plays a massive part. Now, that's fighting in MMA. You know, it's with the smaller gloves, it's easier to hit and it's harder to defend with the smaller gloves on. That brings us also to why the fight was made at 154 pounds. That's an anomaly for Floyd. He's only fought once in his career at that weight. I think it was against Oscar De La Hoya, 154, with the 10-ounce gloves. Right? Why wouldn't he want to fight more closer to his optimum weight, like 147, say? Right? And have the 8-ounce gloves, but have not give up as much on the weight? Well, because Floyd wants to diminish the power of Conor by adding those extra 2 ounces on the gloves. Also, increase his defense because of the 10-ounce gloves are bigger, so he has more padding to defend with, just a bigger glove. Also, it protects his hand. Floyd has been notorious for having hand issues, breaking his hands in fights. So all those factors, he's given up that little bit of weight in order to get the advantage from the gloves and the protection from the gloves. Now, Conor said in the first press conference that there was a lot of stuff in the contract which stipulated like what kind of gloves he could and could not wear. They could not be maximum made gloves. They couldn't be made out of horsehair. So this, to me, shows that obviously these gloves are harder gloves. That obviously there's something about these gloves which Mayweather does not want to step into the ring with them on Conor's hands. Now, whether they like more likely to cut harder, more powerful. Mayweather is trying to stack the deck here. Right? The big question and the big issue is, will Conor's power that he has undoubtedly at with the 4-ounce gloves, will that power translate to the 10-ounce gloves? Now, I've heard quite a lot of people say that they will, because of how the glove is constructed. There's more padding like around the top of the hands. There's less over the knuckles, and they wrap the fists slightly different. It's almost like a bat underneath, with all the wrapping and tape and padding that they have under there. So that's something that we're only going to see on the night. But if we look at some of the pictures that McGregor has posted on Instagram, they look like he's punching pretty hard. Now, obviously, these are selected photos. I'm thinking about the massive uppercut that he had on, is it Tiernan Bradley? His fellow Irish sparring partner that he'd brought in for this camp. And I heard in an interview with him, he said that he's going to have the power. With 10-ounce gloves on, those kind of shots can end fights. And obviously the sparring, they've got the headgear on. And you look at how he sparred Paulie Malignaggi for the first time a few days ago. And Paulie gave an interview after, and he was bruised on his right cheek. He had a big bruise on his left eye. And that's with the 16-ounce sparring gloves, with the headgear on. So I think more than ever that's going to translate into the fight. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. The issue is, can McGregor land the left hand? Can he hit Floyd? Because Floyd has so much more experience in there. He's going to be the smaller man. Conventional wisdom would say that he would be the faster man, except Floyd is 40 years old and your reaction times slow down. And that's undoubtable. I mean, Floyd was hit a lot more later on in his career than he was in his earlier career, except from when he went with Roger and he changed his style a little bit and he went a bit more aggressive. But your reaction times slow down with age. And Floyd is 40 years old now. He's in great condition for a 40-year-old. He lives a very clean, healthy lifestyle, and he doesn't look like he's aged particularly bad. So I think he's got the genes on his side. But that, nevertheless, he will slow, and Conor is in his prime of athletic ability. He's just turned 29. He turned 29 on the day of the last press conference in London, and he has the height advantage. He has a 1 or 2 inch a 1 inch height advantage and a 2 inch reach advantage over Floyd Mayweather. So he has the physical attribute in his build, in the size of him, his head, his hands, he's so much bigger than Floyd. Now, the only thing Mayweather has on his side is the experience, and the experience of the boxing rules and how to be more dirty and how to avoid the shots. He has more experience with the gloves and with the markers of Queensberry rules. So that's his advantage. That's his keys to victory. He's got to be smart and hit Conor without being hit, and use his defense and run away from Conor. But he will lose face, because if he tries to stand and trade, like in the pocket or anything, which is not Mayweather's style, but if he does, because of either whether Conor's got into his head or whether he believes he has to save face, then he's going to get hit and he's probably going to get dropped. So, and that's another thing I don't really like. You get a lot of Floyd's team. You look at Jeff Mayweather, you look at Floyd Sr., any of his Floyd's sparring partners, all his team, they really don't believe Conor has any chance whatsoever. Now, I know Floyd will say, well, I'm not underestimating blah, blah, blah. He's got this and he's selling the fight. He's trying to make it seem like it's going to be more competitive, in my opinion, than what he thinks it's going to be. Like, to the media, he's saying, oh, it's going to be a close fight. This guy, he hits hard. Everyone's got a puncher's chance. But I think deep down he thinks it's going to be easy. And I don't think you can't discount that when all the people closest to him, Jeff Mayweather, his dad, maybe his uncle, they're all saying and whispering into his ear, and all his coaches and all the people in his gym and all the yes men and bodyguards and everything, they're all saying this is going to be the easiest fight of your career. And that's why Mayweather took the fight, I mean, stuff emerged of like maybe a little bit of Floyd's tax problems, maybe a bit in over his head with the IRS. So, as Conor hinted, that he thought the reason Mayweather took the fight was because he needed the money, not to give the fans what they were demanding, as Floyd has repeatedly said in the interviews on the press tour. Now, if that's the case, then he's doing it because Conor represents the biggest payday with the least risk in his mind. Now, whether he's doing it for the money or not, I still think that's why he chose Conor over any of the other athletes or other boxers who he could have chosen. Also, he does want that 50-0 record. That's another thing. He's played it down and said, "No, I'm not interested in that. I've had a great career. I'm happy." But deep down, he really wanted that 50. He really wants that 50. And that's what's going to make this so painful, so humiliating a loss if Conor does beat him. I mean, he's robbed of his perfect boxing record, which he's been going around, he's hung his whole ego, much like Ronda Rousey did, on being the best, on being the champion, on being undefeated and unstoppable, and this larger-than-life character and sportsman and entertainer. Now, I'm not saying it will happen, but if it does, it's going to really sting Floyd. To taste defeat for the first time in his pro career on the biggest stage of all, and the biggest fight in history, with all of social media. I mean, if he gets knocked out, those knockouts are going to be repeated over and over and over again. They're going to be seen by hundreds of millions of people in maybe the first 24 hours alone. Forget over the next decade or 100 years. I mean, billions of people. It would become an iconic sporting image, and that we'd never ever even seen before. I mean, everyone would have seen it. People would see it and show the friends. It would be shared. There would be memes created about it. Floyd probably would have quit Instagram. It'd be that bad. He'd get absolutely ridiculed. And because of the perceived amateurishness of Conor, everyone thinks he's just an amateur, that he's just a nobody fool that stands no chance, who's going to just get ripped apart and mauled and just embarrassed. So if he does it, and that's what I said, before the fight, because so much pressure has been put on Mayweather, that's a factor. That's a factor. Now, obviously, that's the stuff that happens in the fight. What's going to happen in the fight, we don't know yet, because it's not August the 26th. We can theorize and say, like, what if this and what if that, and that's what I've tried to do in this video. But then the aftershock, I've just touched on a little bit, how the world would go crazy. Plus, this is the biggest. I mean, when Mayweather Pacquiao happened, social media wasn't as big as what it is today. Today, social media is the media. It is the driving force in media and in pop culture. It's how people consume the news and their entertainment. And this would be, I mean, it's an absolute gem for social media. And the first massive fight to happen on social media, the build-up has happened on social media, with Conor's fuck you suit and all these kind of little clips that have been shown when in Toronto McGregor went up to him and said, "You can't even read." That was played over and over again. And in London, where Conor like hit him on the head, like rubbed his head. Craziness. Like, you go back in history and there was big fights, the Frazier Ali fight, but it didn't happen on social media, right? It didn't. But this is going down. The pre-fight, the build-up, the hype is going down on social media. And obviously the major news networks, the ESPNs, the Foxes, they're getting on it and jumping on it because that's all they've got to talk about. And they can't not talk about it because it'd be irrelevant if they didn't talk about it. But, yeah. Also, we've had, as in the press conferences, we had a big, stir over the racial thing. People were alleging that McGregor had made some comments, or that his comments when he was saying "dance for me, boy" were racist. And a lot of the pundits went wild, on that story. And this is like what they say, that the black-white dynamic is at play and has been used, as a promotional hype vehicle. And I really do think that is a part of it. People will tune in for that. There are racist people out there who will, want to tune in to see a white man beat up a black man, or to see a black man beat up a white man. That's just how society and how people's psychology is made up, and especially in today's world. Now, I've already said that it'll be a massive upset, obviously, but what I think people in the traditional boxing, the let's call them the boxing dinosaurs, the people who, the boxing coaches, the boxing pundits, all these people, they cannot comprehend, and this is why they give him no shot and they write him off, because their whole mental model and way they've thought and constructed reality rests on, that, the boxers are doing the boxing thing, and the boxers, are superior to the mixed martial artists when it comes to the stand-up. That if Conor was to win, it's not just Conor winning, and not because of all the craziness that had ensued after that, but it's because the whole reality had just be like, well, we're completely shaken up. They'd have to say, well, how did that happen? Like, that wasn't supposed to happen. And Conor is coming in to this in a different way. Not approaching it as a traditional boxer would. And this is probably why Floyd has been able to beat every single boxer, because he's figured out the boxer, how they train. He knows how they move, and he can predict how they move. And so he's always one step ahead of the traditional boxer. That's why he's so elusive, why he's such a great defensive boxer, because you're putting him in there and he already knows the rules, he knows the format. And all these boxers are taught in the traditional boxing way. So they can't beat him at that. But McGregor, who came up in a completely different sport, with a different distance where you have to watch out for the knees and the kicks and the elbows and the takedowns, and he learned and fought under realistic conditions, with a resisting opponent. He's fought that way his whole career, going on 6, 7, 8 years he's been doing this, right? Because he's come up under those rules set, his mind and his technique and his style is taking in all of that. You can just see it at the press conferences. Floyd is very, nonchalant. He's not putting any kind of focus on where Conor is in relation to him. He's completely comfortable in there. He knows that Conor's not really going to do anything to hurt him, so he can just relax and just enjoy it. And you see that, when Conor moves behind him, he doesn't flinch, he doesn't turn, he just doesn't even acknowledge that he really exists. Whereas Conor, he is a martial artist. He's coming at it, he's like, you never give up your back, you're always watching your opponent, you're always cognizant of what is going on around you. You never just assume that somebody's not a threat just because there's these rules, these made up rules, because Conor knows how easy the rules can be broken, and these rules are just agreed upon, and if one person decides not to follow the rules, then you can find yourself in a bad situation. So Conor was always watching, he was always aware, he was turning, and to some that might look like Conor's, scared, is that he's afraid, but he's just being, in my opinion, he's just being aware. He's being in the moment and, not taking anything for granted. Now, let's just briefly touch on the mental warfare that went on in the press conference and is still going on and will continue to go on all the way up to the press conference, to the actual fight, which takes place on August the 26th. And this is, part of how Conor's using his Instagram and his social media. It's all tactics to get into Mayweather's head. He talked a little bit about Floyd's daughter. He talked about black women. He talked about, what it was going to do to him in there. And he embarrassed him. He made fun of his low reading ability. And he's been putting out these subtle bait, where he wore the Warriors basketball jersey number 23, which was worn by CJ Watson, who was the NBA player who was allegedly having an affair with Floyd's wife, which caused Floyd to fly off into a massive rage and be physically abusive towards Josie Harris, which Floyd pled guilty to. But Conor just threw it out there, just wore the jersey in one of his videos. And then somebody picked up on that, a fellow basketballer, Damon Green something, who's a current number 23 for the Warriors. And they had the back and forth on Instagram, and that stuff may play a part. It's all stuff. I mean, Floyd did very well at saying appearing to not be intimidated and not be rattled by anything Conor said. He was drinking his coffee. He was playing with his phone. Although I saw a separate angle of when Floyd was playing with his phone in London, and he was literally just flicking back to his home screen, which looks very poor because he's pretending like he's so important that he's not even focusing on what Conor's doing. He's playing on his phone. Now, if he were just like scrolling through his Instagram or something, or that would have looked believable. But when you're just switching back and forward, it shows that you're just concerned with the appearance and you've not actually got anything to do. You've not got anything in mind. So you're still focused on what's happening, but you're trying to pretend like you're not. Now, there was a lot made of like the stare downs. He had stare downs on 4 separate occasions. To me, it looked like Conor was the more intimidating person. There was a couple of times when Floyd, to me, it looked like he was a little bit intimidated. He broke eye contact a couple of times. He seemed to, in London, he seemed to be not as animated as he was in previous press stops. But I think I'm going to wrap bit up now. We've talked about the before, we've talked about the middle. Before the fight, we've talked about what may happen during the fight, and we've talked about the ramifications after the fight. Because after the fight, if Conor does do it, it's going to change the way people look at mixed martial arts, how they view boxing in mixed martial arts. It will cause a lot of people to have to go and study Conor and find out what he did, and maybe it change the style of boxing somewhat. Because you look back into history, and innovation always occurs from outside the dominant. How it's done currently. Look at Uber with taxis. You look at Airbnb with hotels and hospitality. You look at Skype coming along and disrupting how international communications was done. You look at internet coming through and displacing the monopolies that the telecommunications companies had before. You look at stuff with like cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and these kind of financial technologies, how that's revolutionizing finance. There's so many different areas where time and time again, someone comes from outside, does it a little different, and makes a huge step forward. It always happens, and at the same time, this is a shout out to Robin Black. This is some of his ideas. You go back, and in history, people who did something, athletics, it could be the long jump, it could be the pole vault, it could be chess, it could be cricket, football, whatever. You go back 100 years and look at how these, the athletes and sportsmen were doing things, and the level at which they were doing it at, and you compare it to how they're doing those same sports today. It's night and day. The difference is so vast that they wouldn't even be able to compete. If you took a time machine and you put someone from 100 years ago next to it, it would just. I mean, there was once a time where people didn't think it was possible to break a 4-minute mile. They thought it was impossible, and now they do it all the time. You look at the how the world records for swimming and the marathons and the 100-meter sprints are always constantly being broken by new people because they've got more science and the better nutrition, the better training methods, they have more footage to look at and to replicate and to study, and that's just how life works. So in 100 years time, in 50 years time, in 20 years time, the athletes of the future will be will be so much better than the athletes today. And I just want to leave a final word from Bruce Lee, the quintessential martial artist, a man who would have been UFC champion had the UFC existed at that time. He said the best style is to have no style. It's to be free and to take things from all disciplines. That's what Conor's trying to do in this boxing. He's trying to take his unique style. He's not following the boxing orthodoxies, punching from different angles, using different timing. He's got a much more developed core and legs from all the wrestling and jiu-jitsu and your strength and conditioning work that he's done and kicking that he's been forced to do and has practiced over his career. He's because he's more well developed on the lower half of his body. He can move in faster and in and out and move in different ways better than Floyd because he's not conditioned as much. Right, well, that's it. I'm going to leave it here. The $1 billion dance. I hope you've enjoyed this. I know this has been a long video. I didn't intend it to be this long. Thank you forever. You're a saint if you watched it this far. And yeah, buckle up and enjoy the ride on August 26th. Let's just keep our fingers and toes and everything crossed that some cataclysmic injury doesn't happen and force one of the competitors out, because that would truly be a devastating loss for sports and for sports culture. I mean, this is a cultural event, which will be talked about long after both these athletes are long gone. So there's my contribution towards that. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you. Peace.